lectors who have been listening all the speakers patiently from last 3 days. So, starting with the first lecture of today's seminar, I would like to invite Mr. Amit Holkar sir for the seminar. Please, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope I am audible clearly. Hello. Am I audible?
Ji, sir.
Okay, fine. So, good morning, all the participants. We have a quite good number of participants on the Saturday morning. We start the day with the process which is called as the design process. The topic mentioned against my poster is the design thinking, critical thinking, and innovation design. But that is too broad to cover in a single webinar. So we'll start with the design thinking, and in the subsequent webinar, if possible, we'll go through the other topics. So design thinking is a process in which we are looking to ease our living of life, right? So just for your information, I am Amit Holkar from your neighboring college. I'm head of the department electronics and communication, and I'm the convener of institution innovation council also. So we'll start with the design thinking. So anything, any design or any thinking design that we can use to ease our living of life, that we call as the design thinking. So my topic is mainly focused on what makes our life easy. On our daily routine lives, we take some examples, we do a small activity also. So I request all the participants to participate actively, and if possible, you can unmute yourself if it is enabled for you, or you can also drop your questions and drop your answers also on the chat box, right? So our mind is in a state of thinking, right? Most of the time, not always, most of the time we think about anything or about many things. So if our mind is thinking, and if that thinking leads to make someone's or anyone's or many life easy, then we call it as a design thinking. So at that part, I must say the design thinking, this is the simplest definition. If you, this is the simplest definition or the basic definition to start up with the design thinking. So design thinking means thinking of anything which can make life easy. So I just start with a small activity with all of you. So I just we can then polish all these things. The activity is that I have shown these two materials on your screen right now, and the question is what you can do with these materials. There are two materials, any one of these you can choose. There is a bunch of old newspapers, and there are some old jeans. What can you do with that? Anyone, if you can answer in the chat box. We will take 3 minutes for that. If you do this activity, you will understand the design thinking process very easily. My screen is not visible. Okay. So what you can do with these two used materials, one is the old bunch of newspapers, and other is the old jeans. Any answers from the audience in the chat box? I know you know the answers. So the answers will come Like someone can create a aeroplane with the newspaper. Someone may create a boat from the newspaper. So you may create many things. But if that creation of if that design leads to make life easy for the people, then you can thought it as a design process or design thinking. So these are the some examples which can be useful in households, which can be useful in the people's life. So we have a newspaper bag. We may have some decorative flowers, some pencil or pen holders. There is a very wonderful use of the old newspaper that we make a paper bag to plant trees. We have various uses of these old jeans also. There is a floor mat, there is a bag, there is a holder also in that, in the third photograph. There are various objects we can create with these old used things. Okay, we know it, but this is another example of, right? So example of design thinking process that we have all used the tomato ketchup. Earlier, tomato ketchup bottle used to come in the glass bottle. Still today, if we want, we can take the glass bottle ketchup. But in the glass bottle ketchup, it is very difficult to pull out the ketchup from the glass. So the design thinking success is that we have an inverted plastic bottle. You can squeeze it and remove the ketchup from that. That is quite easy. Okay, so the sauce is same, the ketchup is same. The ketchup company has nothing to do with the bottles, but the bottle company has designed something which is very unique for the which is very unique and which makes easy for people to squeeze the ketchup from the bottle. So this is a example of design thinking success. So you can design thing on a small way or in a big way also. So some of you have must have thinking that why we are focusing so much on the design thinking. What if we make some products from the used paper bags or the used design, used jeans, or what if we make a ketchup bottle? So I just want to tell you that these are just some basic examples of design thinking success. So why we are too much focusing on the design thinking process, I will show in the next slide. You will come to know that this is the DMI or the design value index from 2005 to 2015. So there is a red line, there is a black line. So the red line shows the stock market performance in the window of 10 years that focused on the design process, that focused on the design of their products, which compared to the S&P 500, S&P Standard and Poor 500 index companies. So there, the companies which have design process in their company has 211% more growth than the companies which do not have the design process. So that is why we are focusing more on the design. So why design is important. So you can just take a look at the left hand side, name of companies, Apple, well, Coca-Cola. You might have noticed that the bottle of Coca-Cola has changed many times. The Ford car, Herman Miller, IBM, Intuit, Nike, Procter and Gamble. These are some big names in the Indian markets, and not only in the Indian market but in the international market also. Starbucks, Starwood, Stanley Black and Decker, Steelcase, Target, Walt Disney, and Whirlpool. So these are some design-centric companies which works on the design process. So designing of a product is not just as simple as just we design and then we create some product. The designing is a scientific process, and that scientific process of designing we will try to understand in the today's lecture. So as I told you, the designing is a scientific process. So what is the designing? Design thinking means you have to take some standard values, you have to put some mathematics in that, you have to make some analytics, and then you have to put your heart and mind in that also. So if you put these two things together, so there are two types of thinkings: analytical thinkings, in which we only focus on the analytics, we only focus on the standardization of the things, and on the intuitive thinking, in which we focus on the heart and mind. What our heart felt, we do it. But if we add both of these two, we make a scientific arrangement to make our thinking useful for the people, then it is called as the design thinking. So there are two parts: one is this analytical thinking and intuitive thinking. If we add these two parts, we come to the design thinking. So as I told you, the design thinking is a scientific process. Design thinking is just not we think, design and sell into the market, right? So the last line, if you can just read out: analytical thinking focuses on standardization, while intuitive thinking focuses more on the instincts to drive creativity, innovation. Creativity, innovation is also as much as important as the standardization and the product itself. So what is the design thinking? What is design thinking? It is a structured process of problem solving. So if we know the problem, we can come to the solution also. But there is a process which is a structured process. So it is a structured process. Structured means there is a steps to solve the problem. The structured process for problem solving. It is developed to wicked problems. Wicked. If you go to the Google definition of wicked, it is, you come to know, it is wicked means it is a shaitan type, shaitani problems. So developed to address the wicked problems. What are the wicked problems? Wicked problems are the complex problem with multiple stakeholder groups. The problems which cannot be solved so easily, that is called as the wicked problem. Or it can be used for technology, process, policy, etc. And the purpose of design thinking is to facilitate the innovative solutions and reduce the risk. Facilitate the innovative solutions means innovative solutions will develop and they will facilitate. So what is a big problem? A small definition: a problem that is difficult or impossible to solve because of many reasons. Some of these are incomplete and contradictory and changing requirements that are often difficult to recognize. There are some problems which cannot be solved easily because of incomplete information, contradictory ideas, and changing requirements that are often difficult to recognize, that we call as the big problems. These are some principles. Just stay with me. We'll discuss a case study also in the design thinking process, the principle of design thinking. The structure process, it has a structured process focusing on the users. It uses steps and methods that are defined. Defined means which is already defined, which is a proper way of doing. That is called as the definition. We called it as a defined process. Power is in the whole process and not individual steps. So group of people have to come together and work on the single problem. It is a scientific method to consider ideas to be hypotheses to be tested. If you know what is hypothesis, generally we do hypothesis for the solution. But in the design thinking process, we do hypothesis in the testing phase itself, not at the solution process. So hypothesis will be done at testing process. Diversity in terms of roles to maximize the knowledge, perspectives, and the connections of the team members. So we have a group of members which form a team, and every team member has its own specialization, has its own specialty. So we have to work in a team, we have to work with the scientific method, and we have to work with the defined processes. So these are the principles of design thinking. So now, very interesting. Let's come to the steps of design thinking. So these are the 5 steps of design thinking. First is the empathize. We have to empathize with the people who really need a solution or who really have a problem, which solution need to be find out. Next is the define. Define what? Define is the problem. Define means uh, we have to page it out on a paper and then we define it properly. The next is the ideate. Ideate process. Ideate process involving the brainstorming process. Then the fourth is the prototype, and fifth is the test. So we'll discuss it one by one. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Right? Sometimes after the test, we need to redefine the problem or reframe the problems also. So most of the time, our solution does not meet the expectation what we expected at the start of the solution. So we have to test and redefine the problem again and then test. This is a continuous process, and which is very necessary to be a successful design thinker. So we have empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Empathize means connect with and understand the users. Empathy is not a sympathy. Empathy is something we want to get some information about the problem and then we have to solve that. That is empathize. Connect with the end, you connect with and understand the users problem we have to understand. Next is the define. Define means identify the core problems or reframe the core problems after the testing process. Ideate is the brainstorm lots of ideas. Prototype means narrow down the ideas and build prototypes. And test means use the results to support the decision making. These are the 5 steps. So we take a case study and then we understand what does how these 5 steps help in designing a product or designing a service. So we'll take a case study of home delivery service. The most common example, Swiggy and Zomato type. So first of all, for example, a restaurant owner wants to open its restaurant for home deliveries. First thing is that the first idea is that it will create a web application or it will create a mobile app and then start working on that, right? But the people around that restaurant or the customers of that restaurant really need it or not, they don't know. There is chances that the product will success or there is chances the product will fail, but that is a simplistic way or the unscientific way of approaching or designing a process, designing a product. So we'll go with the step by step. So our case study is that a restaurant owner wants to open its restaurant for online delivery of food items. The step one will involve the empathize with the users. So what should be the steps? The first step is that it he will call some group members or the customers from his permanent customers for an interview before designing a web application, before designing a mobile app. First, he will call the customers for some interviews. He will ask some questions that do you really need an online delivery app for that? So it will create lots of ideas. It will create lots of observations from the customers. Someone says, yes, we need some online food delivery app. It will help us. Someone say, why don't you go for a subscription offer that we do not need to order every day. We just need to subscribe it once, and every day at 11 a.m. I will get lunch at my office. So that is another idea. The third idea is the restaurant owner may ask the customer that why don't you call on phone to order your to order your food? Why do you need to have a mobile app? So the customer or the answer from the customers that it is very difficult for the customer to order food online on telephone, because they do not have a facility to see the menus. The other options are that they mostly the restaurant has one phone call connection, so most of the time it will get busy. So there are many options coming out of the customers. So empathize with the users. So the first step is to interview the customers and collect the data from the user. That is called as the empathy, right? Now, after collecting all the data from the customers, the team of restaurant will sit together and define the problem. What is the problem? That is called as the problem statement. So once the problem statement comes, so what would be the problem statement? The problem statement first is, yes, the users wants this online service, food delivery service. User wants some subscription services also. User may want some reorder services also. If someone wants to eat same kind of stuff after few days also, that it can just reorder the same thing. So these are some problem statement which comes out from the step number 1, which is the empathize. So defining the problem is put together all the gathered information, analyze, observe, and synthesize it to define the core problems. And define the problem in a human-centered way to solve the human problems. So we have made a problem statement from the empathize step. The step 3 comes with ideate the new solutions. Now the step 3 is a brainstorming sessions. The team of the restaurant owner and the team of the mobile app development will sit together and generate the ideas, or share the ideas what can be done, or how this restaurant can be functional quite good in a way that the customers will get the benefit of it. So generate the ideas and new solutions to the problem. That is the brainstorming sessions. Have as many as possible ideas to begin with. Use ideation techniques, investigate or test the ideas to find the best possible solutions. So step 3 is a brainstorming session, how this idea can be implemented, how this problem can be solved using the innovative ideas. So this is the step number 3. The fourth is the prototyping. This is the experimental phase. In the experimental phase, all the ideas that put together in the step 3 will come and put into a prototype. Prototype is not a full working model, it's a demo model or the demo app or demo product. So we'll start the experimenting the product, prototyping, that create conceptual prototypes of the product to investigate the possible solution. We'll design a app which is given for use to the close group of people. We'll test, we'll prototype it, we'll check whether it is working or not. Here you will have a better idea of users behavior, feeling and expectations. You must have heard about the beta testing of most of the mobile apps. So beta is that prototyping the product which is under the experimental phase. So step number 4, prototyping, is the experimental phase. Now the fifth step is the prototype testing. Now this app is given to the users who have initially come to the interview process, right? So once the interview process is done, the same people will give the mobile app to test. They will test. Some of them will give good feedback, some of them will give bad feedback, some of them might have submit some suggestions on the further improvement. So prototype testing will, if there are scope of some improvements in that app, the prototype testing will go again in the step 2, which is the define process. So we have to redefine or reframe our apps, right? So these are the 5 steps. The first is the empathize, second is define, third number is ideate, fourth is prototyping, and fifth is test. So these are the 5 standard steps of design process. If you go through different books, you will have 7 steps or 10 steps or 12 steps of design thinking. These 5 steps are standard 5 steps of design thinking, which is defined by the Stanford University. There are some other universities, other group of people also, they have suggested some more steps, but these 5 steps are the most commonly used step for design thinking, right? So if you observe that we have to think broad at some point of time, and we have to think narrow at some point of time. If we are finding for the problems, we have to think broad. We have to make our mind broad, that we have to take the problem as much as we can. And when we start defining the problem, we have to narrow down our approach. So this design thinking process is sometimes diverging, or sometimes it is convergent process. So sometimes we have to diverge our thinking, and sometimes we have to converge our thinking. So it is a combination of divergent and convergent thinking process. For example, this in this empathize process, we have to diverge our thinking. We have to make our mind broad. While we define the process, we have to converge our thinking. We have to go for a narrow options. And when the problem is defined, we have the problem statement. There are many ideas. There are again brainstorming session, and we have the many ideas to ideate that. So we have again broaden up our mind to make our idea more vulnerable to the users. Then the converging process on the prototype, while we converge it, while we make the experimental, we have to narrow it down so that it will not be a complex product at the end of the time. And after that, again, a test and feedback. That test and feedback process is a repetitive process. You also have noticed that in your WhatsApp mobile also, you will get update every 2 or 3 months. That update is a test and feedback process. So you will update the app, and it will function again in a better way. So that is called as the thinking process. So what are the benefits of thinking process? So benefits of thinking process are: it is a formal process, provides structures, it provides a strategy to those new to this approach. If you are new to this design thinking process, you don't know how to start innovative idea, how to create a startup with your idea, then it is this process helps you in doing that. It provides a strategy to those new to this approach. It supports collaboration among team members, and data driven decision making align team members thinking. If you have a data, you can work better in any data. Some more benefits of design thinking: that the diverse teams are better able to pivot as situation changes. If your team has diverse specialized members, then you may have various situations on which you can handle it on a better way. They have a thorough understanding of the users in design thinking process, and diversity provides the breadth of knowledge and context needed. If you have more team members, then you have more context that you can use in this design process. There are some risks in the design process also. The research has primarily been done with the successful projects. If you study a case study of design thinking process, that research has most of the time done on a successful projects. You have a Swiggy for a food home delivery. There is a success story of Swiggy or Zomato, but no one cares about the failure projects. So there is a risk that you always get inputs from the, or get primarily been done with the successful projects. So you will get the inputs from the successful projects only. So diverse team can lead to disagreements. If your team is too much diverse, if you have too much members in your team, you are you can have disagreements among yourself. Focus on testing everything would delay the decision making. If you start testing, if you start testing everything, so it may delay your decision making. So these are some possible risks of design thinking. So what is the summary of design thinking? Design thinking can lead to more innovative solutions than better meet users need. It will give a more innovative solutions. It improves the collaboration among team members. and it lowers the risk and cost of failure. If you go through these 5 steps, your risk of failure is low, and there is a rate of success is higher. So these are some references from which I have taken the data. And finally, a quote from the Steve Jobs: that design is not just what it looks and feels like, design is how it works. It means a product which looks great is better, but it should also works good. So the design is not everything, but designing is a main part of every product nowadays. So thank you. If you have any questions, you can put into the chat box. Okay, I just seen the Harsha Kadam has put we can use old newspaper for packaging materials, right? So if you have any questions, you can just ask.
Students, do you have any query? Please ask.
If the students need some ebooks on the design thinking process, you can contact Kiran ma'am. I will provide the ebooks also. Yes, Kunal.
Sir, good afternoon. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good
Sir, am I audible? Good morning.
Yes, yes, audible.
Sir, I
Okay,
have one question regarding credit.
Hmm?
Sir, am I audible?
Kunal, you are not audible. Yes, audible now. Yes, go ahead.
Sir, my question is how a student can use a critical thinking in its academic curriculum.
Critical thinking in its academic curriculum.
Yes, sir.
Yes, your academic curriculums, what do you do? Your curriculum is also a project for you. At the start of your semester, you get some syllabus, and most of the time, students have a common way of approaching that syllabus, common way of completing that syllabus. If you want to do it in an innovative way or a critical, you want to apply critical thinking on that, you just follow the steps, or you create some step-by-step process to complete the syllabus. You put some experimental facts into that. You take a brainstorming session with your friends. So you can, at the end of the syllabus, you will gain more than the ordinary students that only focus on completing the syllabus. So that I think you can use critical thinking in your curriculum academic. Just follow the step-by-step procedures. The step may not be the same as in the design thinking process. The design thinking process is basically for the product designs. But yes, your question is very good. You can use this thinking process in your academics also. So you have to approach in a different way and then test. Maybe you get a better knowledge of that, or you may not get better knowledge, but better knowledge. But at the end of the time, you will know, is it profitable for you or not in terms of knowledge, gaining the knowledge. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions? Students, do you have any more questions? Sir, can we end the session?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, all the students and participants for attending the lecture so patiently. And the next lecture is scheduled at 4:30 p.m. So please join on time. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.